Yeah. So uh, I just that you pointed out that you thought that the land was important, where the boundaries of the territory was, like having a land, right, is important. It's also the people are really important, and then like maybe having like a leader to kind of like unite them, right? That's interesting, right? Like I think those are, yeah, I could see them all being major components of a nation. Any other thoughts?
I think to some degree it all has to be under the same like political setup. Like not necessarily every single part of a nation is following the same rules, but they're all under kind of the same uh, roots or like basic laws.
Like, yeah, and they're all kind of, yeah, all in agreement and all together doing on board with the same thing. It kind of would make that much sense to have someone being very, I don't know, like having a very democratic person here and then a king here, like in the same country, right? That
Mhm.
wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, that's really cool. Do you think that China was built to be a nation? Do you think it was?
I believe so.
What makes you guys think that?
Well, it does have a sort of leadership, I mean, it's a like it's growing up as a whole, continent, nation. China, it's been shattered a lot, but it's been united in different places. So I believe it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, well, I guess are the dynasties that we were studying this whole time in class, were they examples of nations?
I believe so. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, like you might think, yeah, the maybe the one distinction is like, I mean, a lot of the people under that, like a lot of times, but a lot of times the dynasties were not led by Han Chinese. They were led by Mongols or Manchurian people, like, and they kind of treated the Chinese as a lower class, almost as subjects. And should the people of a nation be treated as a kind of a lower class?
I don't think so.
I mean, would a nation survive? Is that a very, I don't know. I feel like that nation might overthrow someone, right?
Yeah. If you
Yeah,
put someone on the bottom instead of keeping everyone, if you keep everyone like on the same playing field where everybody can at least try and gain like the same benefits or have the same opportunities, it's not as likely that you're going to have people wanting to like separate or want to overthrow or change everything.
yeah, yeah. If you have a nice set of principles about like just the good, like that everyone should be equal. Maybe that is one quality. So this is really interesting, and uh, the, a lot of social sciences in the academic world teach you that actually nations are pretty recent kinds of things. They're not that they're pretty modern. Like they haven't existed for a very long time. Maybe like 100, 200-ish years. Like especially in the 1800s, like nations really became a big thing. And 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 part of like thinking about it is about how it was created. It was almost created out of it was almost imagined, and sometimes they call it a nation's imagined communities, where people suddenly through things like maybe mass media will really believe that they're all a part of the same thing. Like even people who live, we can feel that kind of, we feel American at the same time as someone in Hawaii feels American, right? Or someone in Oklahoma feels American. And that's kind of interesting, right? And it might have to do with all the rituals we do, all the, our military. It might have to do with a bunch of things. But it's kind of, we have to,
Ah, Professor,
uh,
welcome back.
apologies. It seems like my internet stopped working. So,
Yeah,
um,
happens.
yeah. So, oh, okay. And by the way, it was probably good because I was going on a little bit of a rant. Um, I think we all understand. A lot of us understand. Like, yeah, nations are these things that maybe have a lot to do with like the or beginnings of a lot of like the democracies we think of, like our democracy, the United States of America, is probably one of the major beginning points of the modern nation state. So yeah. And Sun Yat-sen definitely took a lot from the West. He took a lot from us, the U.S. He took a lot from a lot of inspiration from just what was going on in the world. And they weren't one of the first countries, China, to do this kind of, nation building. They were a little later on, and I think after the disasters of the 19th century that you saw with all those crazy rebellions of millions of people being killed, I think you can understand why people felt like there was a need for something like a nation. And so the father of this guy, his name was Sun Yat-sen. He was Cantonese, and he was part of this overseas Chinese community. He got educated in Hawaii. He was a doctor in Hawaii, and he's very well revered amongst many overseas Chinese communities. And so this is a statue of him in Columbus Park. And in his major work, The Three Principles, his major writings, which are conceiving of the three principles, the three people's principles of nation, of democracy, and livelihood. So these three things, these are really important. And they all kind of also are guided around another concept that he put in. And you might notice that I wrote it in Chinese in this preview, right? And it's 天下为公. And 天下, those first two letters, we encountered that in the beginning. It was the heaven under the heaven, the heavens below the heavens concept, or the mandate of heaven. And it says, but now it's all under heaven are equal. So what do you guys think of that kind of reworking of a very old Chinese concept?
I think it shows a shift in the mentality going on at the time, where they wanted to try and include more people to avoid conflict.
Yeah, it's like that there you could integrate ideas of equality and democracy into very Chinese ideas, like the mandate of heaven. So yeah, good point, Yashira. And what's really funny, I think what really highlights the what it takes to make a nation kind of out of nothing is the fact that Matthew, you were saying that, yeah, Chinese people, maybe they do seem to might be able to lend themselves to being one nation because they kind of seem like one people. But Sun Yat-sen famously described Chinese people as a plate of loose sand because he felt it was so hard for different people from different parts of China to get along. And it was very difficult to start this revolution. In fact, arguably, this whole revolution that he started never really succeeded. And that, the kind of China we have today that's the end result of the revolution, but it's a lot of stuff has gone down. And let me get through some of that stuff. So he, so basically through his, his work and his file, he created this Alliance for Democracy, the Tongmenghui, and they created a lot of revolts all over China and outside of China too. And they finally overthrew the emperor, who was only 6 years old at the time. He was a boy, and he's founded the Republic of China. So now it's the Republic of China. It was founded in 1911. Yeah. I guess anyone have like a home country, anyone from immigrant background, and really have they know their home country's Independence Day, everyone knows July 4th, right, for America, but for China it's really well, it's actually a few dates, but one of them is May 4th, 1919. But for the founding of Republic of China, it's October. Oh, I should know this. It's definitely October of 1911. But does anybody remember the independence days of their mother countries?
Well, yeah, I'm American, so July 4th. But for my parents, they're from Trinidad and Tobago. That's in the Caribbean. For
Yeah,
them, it's August 31st, which is when they separated from the UK. Somewhere it was like 19 something, I forget what, but my grandmother used to always tell me about it.
that's crazy. Yeah, that's actually my birthday. That's hilarious. I didn't know that. That's wow.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But that, see, and then yeah, like it's cool how like our family history is also national history, like because our grandparents were swept up in some kind of nationalist fervor. I'm sure wherever you know we were,
Hmm.
a lot of us, I think. Like I mean, Ali, I'm sure you might be able to, your family might be able to relate. In Vietnam, there might be some days too. I don't know about you, Layla, either. Yeah. Well, so it's a really complicated time. I think these are some other figures that you need to know. Pu Yi, the guy on the left, that he was the emperor. But then later on, the Japan kind of when they were trying to take over China, because they were trying to take over China around soon after, they made him like a puppet leader of the part of China that they controlled, which is confusing. And then there's Chiang Kai-shek. Remember that name, Chiang Kai-shek. And then there's Mao Zedong, early figure. And then there's this guy, Yuan Shikai, this crazy guy with the mustache, with the military things. He was one of the last military officials of the late Qing dynasty, and he eventually, he joined in with the revolution and he became the first president. But he was he was a military figure, and he was kind of a little corrupt and belligerent, and probably we're going to see that there was a lot of tragedy and violence, to say the least, about this time. So if I were to do this class with you guys in person, this was what I would do. We would do this little timeline activity where I would divide up all these events, and you would put it up on a timeline. I can't do that. So instead, we're going to look at a timeline that someone created online. So you guys can see this is really the first half of the 20th century. And we last week we talked about the Opium Wars really crippling China and opening China up to all this Western kind of exploitation and privatization of their businesses, and Boxer rebellions where people, everyone killed, basically, and then you see. Around 1911, things are turning, but it's very, very start and stop. Within a year of Sun Yat-sen, kind of creating this new Republic of China, Yuan Shikai steps in, someone who used to be a Qing official, and he says, "I'm going to be the president." And at this time, he oversees this time, towards the end of his life, of this crazy time when everything just falls apart, falls to shit, and the entire revolution does not work. And it's actually a warlord period for a good decade. You see in 1916. So warlords. What do you guys think warlords are? I mean,
I don't know, I think they belong in movies like Mad Max and whatnot.
yeah. I mean, yeah. If you think about it's kind of like taking something that used to be such a grand system and then bringing it back to like medieval times, kind of like Mad Max, like the dissolution of, and then so you have these kind of belligerent figures. By this time, Yuan Shikai has died, but like people like him are in place in all these different places. And I'm going to share with you a movie, the trailer of a movie where that takes place in the warlord era. So maybe this will be fun for you. It's called Let the Bullets Fly. So let's take a look at this. Okay. I'm sorry, I think it didn't work. There we go. Okay. So this is called Let the Bullets Fly. It's actually it's kind of a funny movie. It's kind of a funny, violent movie, kind of like a Tarantino movie, if you guys like movies. So it's kind of supposed to be funny, but it also shows you kind of how crazy and just wild this time was. I mean, it's also fictional. So yeah. All right, so let's watch it.
The screen
it?
No.
See that?
Yeah, I can obviously see it.
你就是县太爷？当县长最要紧的是什么？忍耐。委任马邦德为峨县县长。马某人这个县长，买官就是为了挣钱，谁有钱就挣谁。那谁有钱？你有钱。哈哈哈哈哈哈！
先发制人，跟他耍耍。
到了，全面在敌手。哈哈哈哈哈！
算球，算球，算吧。
So, what'd you guys think?
Is this on Netflix? I'd love to watch this.
It might be, yeah. Let me write down type in the name if in case anyone's interested in watching it. Let the Bullets Fly, directed by Jiang Wen. It's yeah, it's an interesting movie. It has people like who does it have? Like the guy from it has Chow Yun-fat, who, if you did watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, maybe you might have seen him too. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Well, let me move on. Okay. So yeah. So warlord period, pretty crazy. And then the Nationalist Party goes on this expedition called the Northern Expedition. By this time, actually, there is a new emerging political party that's happening, and that the Nationalist Party actually is friendly with. Does anybody want to guess what the name of this political party might be? Something popular at this time?
Wait, hold on. Communist Party?
Yeah, very good. The Communist Party is starting to emerge. It really gets started because of, in a lot of ways, Russian backing and support, because the Soviet Union is, this new emerging socialist success. And in the beginning, the nationalists and the communists actually share a common, a common cause. They both believe in the same things. If you go back to, and I encourage you guys to read page 178 and page 179 and read Sun Yat-sen's writings, because he is talking about the same things that communists were talking about. He was saying that it's a problem that most Chinese farmers do not own the land that they work on, and that only the very rich have everything. And he was kind of proposing some kind of land reform. And this is exactly what the communist revolution is about. It's about causing class consciousness and understanding of the inequities of class, and then the people rise up. Is kind of the idea. Of course, I'm talking very broadly. I'm not an expert in communist studies, but does anybody? Does anybody have any opinions about communism in general?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Let me type it in.
Sure.
Now that we've been introduced to the new Chinese Communist Party, this week. Do you have any existing ideas about opinions about communism? Anybody? Yeah, I mean, some of the largest communist, governments are pretty unsuccessful, or they kind of don't have a great reputation, I think, worldwide, right? The Soviet Union eventually collapsed, and we don't love the human rights abuses of China, towards Uyghurs or to other people. So, yeah. But at this time, at least, I mean, the ideas of it, of that there needed to be, it's in keeping with what Sun Yat-sen was saying, which was equality for all people. So, but soon enough, there is a new leader of the Nationalist Party emerging, and his name is Chiang Kai-shek, and he is. I don't really know why. I'll be honest. I might. This is where my teaching hat is falling apart, because I actually don't know specifically why the two fell apart, the communists and the nationalists. But I do know from just the history of what happened afterwards that Chiang Kai-shek is a person who has many features of an authoritarian, and he rules much more strictly, and he basically tries to, not only does he cut ties with the communists, but he forces them, he kills any associated communists pretty much that he can get his hands on, and he creates a massive purge. There's huge massacres of people who are sympathetic to the communist cause, and they are exiled out into the distance, and some of them survive, and one of them, his name is Mao Zedong, and him coming back and surviving and actually winning the favor of many rural Chinese areas at this time is gonna come back, because they're gonna come back and start fighting. And Mao eventually, I don't know, does anybody know who won the kind of the civil war between the nationalists and the communists in China?
Communist.
Well, we know it's the communists. So how did they do that? Considering they were the ones that were kind of kicked out, and the nationalists were very, very strong, very, very almost bloodthirsty, and it's it was a martial law, so it was military rule. Everyone very, very strict rules about how things were run. So it wasn't really the ideals of the Nationalist Party eventually. So things got distorted. In between this time, you also have something called the May 4th movement, which is all these students who are going out and demonstrating against repeated foreign exploitation of China, all these bad treaties that we get. They really start protesting more and more and saying, no, we need political power. And they are also very smart people, and they are transforming culture and literature, and they're transforming the way Chinese people think and speak and talk, and the kind of literature is modern. They call it like modernist literature. And then in the soon after, by the time of the there's a kind of a blank period. I don't know what I'm talking about, the 20s, but in the 30s, Japan starts to invade, and Japan has already been on this imperial rise, trying to show that they're one of the big guys alongside Britain and Spain, or I guess Spain had kind of diminished a little bit, but it was still up there. They were all fighting each other, and so the Japanese were getting really aggressive, and they were trying to occupy more and more of China. And the first thing they occupied was the place that they're next to, which is where it was Korea, and then it's the place pretty much Manchuria, where the Manchurians lived in northeast China, and that's yeah, I want to show you guys a clip of it, of a movie about this time period and area. So I'm going to do that. Any thoughts so far?
None, but to continue.
It's a lot. It's really, really random. It's like, this is a lot of history. So thank you for keeping on board. Because it's a lot to throw at you. Just, this is how it might help you guys. Think of it like it's a fantasy novel, like it's Game of Thrones, because it's a little batshit crazy, this part of Chinese history. So it's kind of fantastic. This is a movie called Devils on the Doorstep, and it is about the Japanese in this time.
谁？我。
快穿衣裳！
什么呢？
我去楼下班。
谁呀？我。哎，
和尚爷，叫啥？
马大三儿，
村儿叫啥？
瓜家摊儿。
黑更半夜，点灯干啥？
寻思事儿。
那，你就好好寻思寻思。听着，
哎，
我们有2件东西，先搁你这儿，一样不能丢，一样不能少，还不能让鬼子知道。出了半点闪失，要你命！
那啥，这村头就有个跑老的，跑不中吧？
杀不中，这叫灯下黑，明白没？
明白了。那要是出事了，找谁呀？
你。 找他们去！ 马大三儿，听着，这俩人抓空替我们审审。年30物尽黑影，我们过来求人，连口供一块堆带走，明白没？
明白了。那到时候谁来求人呢？
我。
这么的，都这么的，都这么的，蹭，头墙都撩了。
那么的，他叫个啥？
没说，他都说个我。
那么的，这长得啥样？
没看着我豁着眼呢，
穿啥衣裳？多高个啊！
我豁着眼呢，你豁着眼，你看着我了？
多人呢？
我不是豁着眼的吗？没敢看。
那么的，他到底是咋说的？
他都说这家人先搁你们村，等30物尽黑夜再回来求人。还说这叫灯下黑。
Okay, so that was actually a whole clip from the movie. Yeah, so it's I think it's supposed to be a satire. It's also actually by the same director as the first clip, the first movie that I showed you, and it's a kind of a satire again about the politics of the time, about just all this miscommunication, because obviously it's Japanese and Chinese people, and kind of a lot of kind of hilarity about this at this border point between these two major nations with very strong patriotic sense, you know. So I think yeah, that might be a fun movie to look at if you guys are into it. Yeah, so that one's called Devil's on the Doorstep. Let me write that down. That one is called Devil's on the Doorstep. So yeah, it's a pretty complicated history. You know, eventually the Japanese really do take pretty much, you know, very, very far into China, such that they pretty much take over all of China. You know, parts of southern China are already taken over the Japanese. One particular horrible moment was known as the Nanjing Massacre, a horrible siege and then just raping and pillaging of this former grand capital of China. Has anyone heard of the Nanjing Massacre? Or some people call it the rape of Nanking.
I've heard it as the rape of Nanjing, but I didn't really learn much about it. I just remember learning it briefly, like a very long time ago.
Yeah, it's I mean, just the fact that it's called that says a lot. So it's I think many people, like probably I think it's like hundreds of thousands murdered, and pretty much the entirety of the women population were raped, and like, you know, there in you know, and it's just it's insane. It was like, I think like a 10 day-ish siege or something, some crazy thing like that. It really shows the barbarity of this time period, not just in China, but everywhere in the world. This is the same time that the Jewish Holocaust is going on. You know, it just seems like the world is on fire, and there's and that this battle of empires has just led to complete evil. is I think there's no other way of saying it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any other takes on this time? It's kind of crazy where I started with like democracy and, oh yay, new nation, and then the flip side of a nation is patriotism and hatred of other nations, right? Sometimes people say too much patriotism is bad. Like, I don't know. I remember my lifetime when 9/11 happened. Oh my God, all the freaking God Bless America songs I had to sit through because everyone was so patriotic, because they wanted to hate on the Islamic world. And it became this whole, you know, scared of the other people kind of thing. That's definitely what you see, you know, in this time period. Yeah, I went really broad, but anyone have any thoughts?
One thing that sticks out to me about this is that I've actually heard from a Chinese person, like, that is pretty open to like criticizing China and, like, you know, isn't really biased, isn't too patriotic, being really against Japanese people, even though they like the culture and the food and all that stuff, because of this event that happened.
I mean,
like,
it's hard to not look at that. That's like, yeah. I didn't. You see, like, it's funny. As someone who's Taiwanese, and I have a different relationship because actually my mother country was a colony of Japan. We were kind of more integrated into this Japanese empire than other parts of China in the current time. My grandma speaks Japanese. Like, she will, like, I can't communicate with her, but she'll, you know, she had to teach Japanese, which is crazy. And so it's interesting. I think what's interesting too is I want to just jump to this part of the presentation. And at the same time as there, you know, clearly the Japanese Empire hated and had these racial ideas against other peoples of Asia, I guess, or something. They at the same time, Japan was the place where a lot of people went to, a lot of Chinese students went to they fled because China was in such a disastrous state at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. So you had a lot of Japanese influence in Chinese culture. Japan, in a way, helped China modernize and become a more modern state. Many of the words that we use in modern Chinese today are loan words that are kind of translated from Japanese. The word I think the word wuxia, which is like the kung fu novels, that comes from kind of a Japanese conception of things. Like, so it's weird. It's confusing because there's some great cultural exchange between Japan and China, and then in other instances there's it's really the kind of the fascism, the horrible evil of a real imperial rule. Yeah, and I think that really, suddenly makes all of these glamorous kinds of empires that have a little bit of glimpses of prosperity. Ultimately, it's all for naught because you also acted in incredibly inhumane ways that are entirely uncivil. So it's confusing. Other things that are interesting. Chiang Kai-shek was a very devout Christian, and he was and there was a lot of Christian activity in this time in China, because of the missionaries from Europe and because of just influence from the rest of the world. China's not isolated. It absorbed all these ideas: democracy, Christianity, communism. It will take whatever and absorb. So that's interesting. Some of the different writers I have listed, they were people that were kind of part of this May 4th movement, this wellspring of students who changed Chinese thought. And one of them his name is Lu Xun. He's very famous. And he's sad because he actually eventually kind of was beaten almost to death by, in a way, forced to death by the communists. So next week we'll see how the communist movement, this thing that actually wins wins the Civil War, and it seems promising, ends up being very, very unsuccessful in many measures. So yeah, there's a lot to go through, and I don't want to get you guys too I don't want to get you guys too confused. These are just pictures of so this is Chiang Kai-shek. He's the guy who led, the guy in the middle with the epaulets and the military garb. He is Chiang Kai-shek, and he became the leader of the Nationalist Party, kind of took the mantle from Sun Yat-sen. Sun Yat-sen had died, actually. So, but what's interesting is that his wife, Mei Ling-song, is the sister of Sun Yat-sen's former wife, Qing Ling-song. And they were all part of this group of three sisters of this very, very wealthy, very successful trade family, and they were called the Song sisters. And they kind of ruled. They were like a political class. They were like the Kennedys of China. And how did China defeat Japan? Eventually, the Allied forces came into play, and the U.S. got involved. And so the United States became the biggest ally of the Nationalist Party, of Chiang Kai-shek. And so you see a very close relationship between the nationalists and the U.S. Chiang Kai-shek's brother-in-law is that guy with the glasses who's sitting in the Oval Office of the White House with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Over opposite is a woman named Anna Chennault, and she had married the person who led this volunteer service in World War II, this Air Force service that protected China. And and then it's interesting, this picture in the middle, you can see Chiang Kai-shek is right next to Mao Zedong, and they're next to each other, because in the beginning, the nationalists and the communists were not fighting. They were the same party. They were they were united, and it was only later. Yeah. So very interesting times. Basically, so let me wrap up what happens at the end. Well, at the end, finally, the United States drops 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And suddenly, and the Japanese empire has to retreat and admit defeat, and is eventually occupied by the U.S. military and restructured in and what's happening in China? Well, now the Chinese Civil War that had been put on hold because everyone was being attacked by Japan is resuming, and the communists win. They beat the nationalists. They defeat them, and it's in part because the communists have a lot more popularity amongst the people, because they actually won a lot of favor of a lot of poor people when they were being exiled. They kind of brought a lot of people onto their cause, and they were sympathetic to them. The nationalists by this time were associated with some very seedy things. Some people even accuse them of really letting Japan invade China and being just as corrupt as Japan, and trying to just do business with Japan. So that's really why the Nationalist Party, the Nationalist Party in Chinese is called the Kuomintang. And when you hear that, it's Kuomintang or KMT. When you hear that, a lot of times people, when they talk about that, they're having some kind of association to Taiwan. And that is because once Japan was defeated, Taiwan it used to be a Japanese colony, right? And then, so it no longer was a Japanese colony. It got handed over back to the Nationalist Party of China. And they started to take over, and they did some of the same things that they did in China to Taiwan. They started massacring many people that they thought might try to fight against them, against their rule. And they ended up killing tens of thousands of Taiwanese people. And then they placed Taiwan under martial law, just like in China, which means that it was under military rule. And this wasn't lifted until 1987, so it was for 40 years. It's pretty substantial. So, this is a party that is a U.S. ally, and it was also seen as being China. And what happens when the communists win in 1949? Well, they're all pushed out. They have to flee. Them and all of the people that are affiliated with them all have to flee to places like Taiwan and Hong Kong. So the entire government, you can imagine an entire government jumping ship. If if Trump's administration had to flee to, Puerto Rico or something, that'd be crazy. But imagine that. It would be very unwieldy and probably traumatic for many people, no matter how much money you had. So, yeah. This is a building in Chinatown. I don't know if you guys go down Mott Street ever. Anybody go down Mott Street? This is, yeah? Sometimes?
Sometimes.
Well, have you ever seen this building before? You probably can't miss it.
I don't remember how far down, but I remember you were talking about a building like this before.
Yeah, I think, okay, I guess I'm a broken record. This is
No. You were talking about a different building. It was it was like some union association thing.
Yes. The Anyang Tang. Yeah. So
the
merchant associations or the family associations. Well, yeah. Eventually, those associations all got together and became this thing called the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. It's kind of like the official town hall of Chinatowns, and you'll find them in all historic Chinatowns. And the flag that they fly is, people think that's the Taiwanese flag, and it is the Taiwanese flag. It's just the Republic of China flag. And so you'll see this flag a lot still in Chinatown, and it shows you that much of many Chinese Americans came to America at this time, because it was wartime. It was crazy. People had to flee, and a lot of them came to America, and a lot of them were nationalists, and that's why Chinese America is very connected to this Republic of China identity, this Republican era. I mean, the interesting thing is Sun Yat-sen, the father of the Republic of China, is the figure that both communists and nationalists can, respect and honor, because he represented like the unity of that idea a long time ago. But clearly, China's pretty separated, or this ideology caused a huge rift. Yeah. So, yeah, I you know what? It's 1:41. I think I'm kind of keeping you guys. I want to give you guys some time to talk about some Chinese food that you guys like. So here's a little slide. I'm going to put up a discussion board for this week and next week. I'm going to put it together into one, and you guys can look up some kind of Chinese food and tell us about it. These are some suggestions. Cha shao bao or char xiu bao, barbecue pork buns, lamb skewers, hot pot or huo guo, sweet silken tofu, rice noodle rolls, bubble tea. I remember Stephanie, last time I saw her on a chat, I didn't see it before, that she was like, oh, does bubble tea count? And I was like, oh, I would have loved to talk about bubble tea, because they say bubble tea comes from Taiwan. So
Cool.
it's interesting. Yeah. Does anybody, has anyone had barbecue pork buns before?
They are so good. They're one of my favorites.
Ooh, yeah, not good on your health, but good on your heart. Yeah. And I love that, like, kind of, like, how would you describe the taste of it?
I don't know. It's just a mixture of like sweet and savory.
Yeah.
I don't know. I rarely have them, obviously, because I don't even have access to them in my area. But when I do have them, I love them. They're so good.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm like, I don't live in a Chinese community. I can't get any of this stuff, but it's, yeah, it's, I think I love how it's like sweet and savory. There's a little bit salty, a little bit sweet, and that's kind of like, that's barbecue. It's principles of barbecue. And I really, dishes like this make me really respect the importance of a lot of Chinese sauces, like the spices and the sauces that we use in our cooking. I don't think it's unique to Chinese cuisine. I think, obviously other cultures have a lot of fascinating spices, but I think that it's interesting. It's also, for a lot of meats, it's a preservative. It's a way to cure meats, which I always think that, I always try to, when I try to look at any aspect of culture, I want to see, what does it say about the people? Like, it says your resourcefulness, or how you live life, or how do you make things easier, like preserve meats and stuff like that. Yeah. Does anybody like tofu or dislike tofu? Maybe I should put a poll out. I'm gonna ask.
I've never had tofu before, but I wouldn't mind trying it.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. Like, I barely know what soybeans are. Like, I think I might have learned it through having to prepare to teach this class that, soy came from like northern China. But it's interesting. Yeah. Do you like tofu? I'm just gonna put this up as a poll. Yes, no, kind of.
I like it in like the soups that I get. I've only ever really had it in the soups.
Nice. In soup. Like, what kind of soup?
I don't even remember the name. It's just like, to the restaurants that I've been, we might order a soup and it'll have like a mixture of like tofu and a bunch of vegetables. Usually it's a little bit spicy, not the tofu itself, but the broth, and it gives it like a nice taste, and it's usually really, really soft. It's not the firm kind.
Cool. It almost sounds like hot and sour soup, like swan la tan, hot and spicy, sour spicy soup. Like, they'll have all that stuff. Like, they have all the good, pepper and tofu and bamboo and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Or it makes me, yeah. And the thing, the one that I pointed out as example, sweet silken tofu is in a water, and it's silken, so it's like it basically it falls apart, and it's like floury. So even in Chinese, in Mandarin they call it dou hua, and hua is a dou is bean. A dough is bean, and that's actually the dough of tofu. Doufu is, I don't know what fu means, but I can imagine it means curd. So a bean curd, basically. It's a curdled bean. And hua is flour, because it's so silky and falls apart. It's almost like flour. It's like as delicate as a flour. And this is a tofu that's sweet. So, tofu, because it doesn't really have a taste, you can prepare it in various contexts. So you might see kind of a sweet dessert in certain places too. Yeah. Cool. Anybody want to you can even look up one and share in the chat. Okay, so it's kind of a split between yes and kind of. Nobody, you can admit that you don't like tofu. You can I'm not going to be like, you hate Chinese people because you don't like tofu. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, let's see. Well, so, all right. I'm obviously having way too much fun just talking in this live feed. Tends to be cooked or seasoned correctly. Yeah, it really depends on how you use it. Yeah, and it's an encouragement to spice it up. I mean, it's literally soy sauce, right? That's another thing from tofu is just a substitute for salt. So a wet salt, right? It's usually they literally just put it's like sea salt and tofu and the beans, and the beans are actually fermented. So fermentation, I think, is a very important process in a lot of Chinese foods. You'll see, like, you'll have the stinky fermented bean paste and stuff like that. So, there's a few things I think I can think of in Chinese cooking that, I don't want to stereotype Chinese cooking, because I think in America we have a particular idea about Chinese food. And usually that idea is really not really, representative of all the food in all of geographical China. Obviously, it's more Cantonese, and it's very influenced by a lot of things, a lot of Western things. So, you go to your Chinese bakery and you get like, a bun and a hot dog in it, that's a little different. Or you have the egg tarts, if anyone's had egg tarts before. Yeah. So, but at the same time, I do think there are some distinctive qualities about things in parts of China that have to do with ingredients that are around. So maybe, bamboo, different kinds of fruits, especially if it's in southern China, more tropical. I think the importance of steaming is really important. You always use steam instead of instead of other kind of forms of cooking. I think there's a lot of steaming. So yeah. All right. Well, anyone else want to share any food things? You can maybe even look up a video. Like, is there a favorite video you have of Chinese food? Here, actually. Oh yeah, yeah.
Dish that I don't remember the name of, but we usually get it in dim sum, and it's like rice that's wrapped up in like a leaf, and it's steamed, and it's sticky, and has like the pork in it.
Yes. Oh, I can talk. Yes, that's so good. I wish I knew it in Cantonese. I don't know Cantonese, and I don't even know if I know it. Well, okay, so this is interesting, like that kind of sticky thing, right? And then it's wrapped up in some kind of leaf. Like there's a few versions of that. There's like it can be wrapped up in tea leaves, or it can be wrapped in lotus leaves. I think the ones in dim sum a lot of times are like in lotus leaves. There's another. They also do it in the holiday. The double fifth holiday, which takes place around June of our year, and it's when they do the dragon boat festival, and they'll eat something called zongzi, and that's that sticky rice in the leaves, and sticky rice that I like. Where does that come from? That it's in Chinese, it's nuomi, so it's a particular kind of rice that is stickier, and I wish I knew more about it because it reveals how little attention I pay in the kitchen. But yeah, does anybody cook with sticky rice or had any other kinds of sticky rice things?
I mean, for me, not Chinese wise, but I've had onigiri rice balls.
Oh, yes. I think onigiri, that's a great example of the importance of rice in East Asian places, and the fact that it's Chinese people don't have a monopoly on cool food ideas. I mean, Japanese speak, we
But I,
talked some smack about Japanese today, but they know how to perfect things like sushi, like I don't know, origami and sushi, and yeah, they're very
Sushi and like the
science-oriented.
fruit is phenomenal. Like they have luxury fruit that you really can't get anywhere else, and it could cost up to thousands of dollars to like buy a whole bunch of fruit. Like I've seen videos of them, and they're just like they're perfect and they're massive, and it's like the care that they put into it is insane.
Did you say fruit?
Yeah, they have like a whole
Oh,
it's like this luxury fruit thing. I don't even know how to describe it because I don't see many videos on it. But
wow, that's so cool. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I really think that
but
I think they really took to, they just knew how to take the capitalist model and really make it work for them. Yeah. Um, you know what? I thought anyone else? Well, I think I'm gonna show you guys a video.
I mean,
Oh, sorry.
uh, I was
Yeah,
gonna
yes,
say,
Matt.
there was, I don't know what the name of it was. It was some sweet, that kind of looks like a century-old egg. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes. There's like fermented eggs, like 1,000-year eggs, and yeah. Um, or tea. Sometimes they're also tea eggs, which are not fermented. They're just boiled and stained in a really rich sauce of soy and tea and like spices. Um, yeah. Is that one of the ones that you were talking about?
I'm trying to find it right now. I think it had like a lotus seed in it or something, if I'm remembering right.
Oh, like huh. Oh, century egg. So pidan. It's called pidan. Yes.
Mm.
Okay. So let me put it. So at least Wikipedia has something that might give you some ideas of pidan. Pidan means skin egg, and I think it's just preserved fermented kind of egg things, and yeah, they're very very. It's a lot, and you might find some in. Well, I was thinking maybe you might find them in cakes, but maybe not. Maybe, now that I think about it, yeah. Uh,
Here it is. Here it is. I found it. It's called Lian Ji Pia. If that uh if that rings a bell.
uh,
Lian Ji
well,
Pia.
if you want, yeah, please put a discussion board post about it, and
Sure.
yeah, or on the chat, yeah. Um, I was thinking of sending you guys a clip of a show by the guy Eddie Huang, who's kind of a somewhat popular restaurateur who made the show Fresh Off the Boat off of his life story, and he loves food. He's a restaurateur, but I think we don't have time, and I don't want to. Maybe I'll just send you guys maybe a good a good link somewhere. But I do want to spend some time thinking about next week so that uh, uh, I don't throw you for a loop or anything. So um, I haven't really been. So some of you guys have asked me about like the final projects, and I think I've been giving kind of announcements here and there. But we're going forward with this final project concept. And I don't really have anything new to share with you, but I did want to ask you guys if you have any questions or concerns or thoughts, or if you want to run a topic by me, something that you think you would be interested in presenting in a paper or a presentation. Yeah. Ooh. So Yoshiro mentioned some really good foods. Lotus root. Oh, yeah. I mean, sesame balls and sauteed green beans with pork. Ooh, yeah, like some minced pork maybe. Yeah, like yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, things like lotus root and sesame, they're not as common in a lot of other foods, but they're like lotus is definitely symbolic. Like it's that the flower of youth and innocence and reincarnation and
Oh, there's a sorry. Continue.
yeah, that's it.
Okay. I just found another thing I love a lot. It's called Jian Dui.
Let's see it.
Jian Dui. It's like a little like sesame ball pastry as well, and it's
Okay.
it's like crisp outside, like brittle kind of, and like softer on the inside, and it's really chewy.
Cool.
Oh man, I just go crazy over those things.
I think part of the reason why I wanted to pair this this week with talking about food is because of kind of the discussion of nations. Like a lot of times I think yeah, a lot of foods in Chinese foods, the way Chinese people think about it is in terms of regions, in terms of the provinces. Like Sichuan is known for hot, spicy foods. So is Hunan. Lanzhou is known for the making noodles because of the flour, and that's where the Silk Road kind of starts. And so everyone kind of has like a regional identity, and I think part of it might have a lot. I think this is a time in Chinese history where people's understandings of each other's regions, there's a lot of cross-pollination because there's a lot of movement through military and create like development of modern cities. So I think the creation of the nation is almost about this, almost the stereotyping of different regions. Like once you have a nation, like kind of like in the U.S., like we'll have very strong identities. Like Texan is something very different with bullhorns, very different from New York or something like that. So, ooh, cool. So maybe I'll download your picture, Matthew, of the sesame balls. Great. So if there's no other thoughts about your presentations or papers, I think you guys don't have to be too scared about it right now, because I don't want you to work on it right away. You just can still think about what you're interested in sharing with the class for the last class. It's basically the last class session is when we're devoted to presentations and papers. And so next week we're going to talk about the communist regime. So it's going to be 2 chapters, 14 and 15. Yeah, if you can, I would like you to read it. If you don't have the book, you might be interested in maybe finding another resource, like maybe going to even Wikipedia. To be honest, Wikipedia is I like Wikipedia. But if you don't, does anybody not have the book with them?
I have the book.
You have it, and yeah. If you don't, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about how the class has kind of been a pretty messy. I understand. So I'm grading accordingly, and of course, this book is not the only place where you can learn about Chinese history. So, yeah. So hopefully we have an interesting discussion about communism. I mean, that's the big one, and yeah. So, does anybody have any thoughts before we go?
No, just I hope you guys are still safe during these times and whatnot.
Yeah. Thanks for being an actual human being, Matt, and saying and asking about how we are. I went right into class.
Yeah, no problem.
Is everyone doing okay, or anything particularly concerning right now for anyone?
Well, I'm switching on my toilet, if that's anything. That's why I had to be gone for a bit.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, you don't want to. That would be a Zoom fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
stay safe and happy and healthy, and don't be too hard on yourself. I know my habits have been thrown way out of the window, but I really do appreciate doing this job, because I think education is just talking about stuff and learning is a great way of great therapy right now. So yeah. Well, have a great week, and I'll put up those discussion board posts, and I'll see you guys next week for our Communist China week. If you guys want, you guys can also share favorite kinds of Chinese media, film, TV shows, things that you maybe have seen, maybe music videos, like rappers or like who are coming up, or I don't know, anything, because we're going to talk a little bit about film next week too. Cool. All right, I'll see you guys later.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, Yashira. Bye, Matthew. Bye, Leela.